Good evening, everybody. Long story short, I grew up seeing my father injecting himself almost daily because he had what Jamaicans call sugar, aka diabetes. On this particular day, he felt ill, and whenever he felt that way, he equated that ill feeling to high blood pressure, high blood sugar, because that was usually the case. He had been living with diabetes for years, so whenever he felt that way, it usually meant that his blood sugar levels were high. So what would happen is that on that particular day, he felt that way, he injected himself with insulin. After a while, he still felt ill, so he took another dose of insulin. All right, I was the only one home with him at the time, and the ill feeling persisted. So he called me and he said that I should call a cab to take him to the hospital. And I knew that meant that something was wrong, because my father would never call me and tell me to call a cab to take him to the hospital. Anyway, we went to the hospital. We went to the emergency section. And if you know anything about the University of the West Indies, especially at that time, emergency or no emergency, you're going to wait, right? So we waited for a while, and then after we moved from the outside waiting area to the inside in the hospital, they put my father in a wheelchair, and then they told me that I should go over to the cashier to fill out whatever I need to fill out and to make payment. I was 17 at the time, and in those days, yeah, long time, in those days, we never have online banking and cell phone as we do right now. So if I want, so I had to ask them to borrow their landline to call my brother, because he would be the one who would make the payment. I couldn't get through to my brother, so I had to call my neighbor landline and then ask them to try and get through to my brother. Anyway, I went back over to my father. The doctor came over. When the doctor came over, he asked him his name, why he's there, and a bunch of other questions. He then looked at me and asked me for the receipt, the proof of payment. So of course I had no receipt because payment had not been made. So I told him that my brother was on the way with the money, and he said that that didn't matter. He couldn't do anything until payment was made. He looked at my father and he said, "Mr. Davidson, I think you're having a stroke." So I'm like, okay, so what that mean? What you going to do? You're going to start treating now? And he's like, as I said before, we can't do anything until payment was made. Because apparently at that time, it was policy that they couldn't treat you until you made payment. Long story short, my father ended up, it was no longer, "Mr. Davidson, I think you are having a stroke." My father did in fact get the stroke, full blown. He was bedridden for 10 years until he died. That stroke paralyzed half of his body. The left side was completely paralyzed. From the crown of his head until the toe point, that was immobile. He was bedridden. And it hurt my heart. Eventually, I started university. I lived on hall, so when I would come back to visit, and whenever I would visit home, I would see him, and it would hurt, because he had diabetes, so and he was not able to move. He did everything on that bed, right? Because and when I would see him, if he had bed sores, it would be hard to heal because he had diabetes. I don't know if you know anything about diabetes, right? So it would be hard to heal. And when I saw that, I felt helpless. I felt as if, there was nothing I could do about it. And I was adamant in that moment that this was not going to be my life. My father ended up being bedridden for 10 years until he died. And that was my wake-up call. Before, when I was younger and I saw my father injecting himself, I always used to say, that's not going to be my life. But the approach I took to that was not going to be my life was that I was always physically active. So in school, I participated in all the sports you can think of. I participated in sports because for me, that was my way to fight diabetes, physical activity. PE was always my favorite subject, right? So I went to university now, again, still participating in sports, representing my block, my hall, the university in netball, football, volleyball, basketball, table tennis, you name it. I was participating in that. And it got to a point now, then it was graduation. And because it was graduation, it means I was no longer a part of a sporting team. And guess what happened? Your girl started to put on weight because I was playing so many sports for all my life that I took it for granted that, yeah, you know, so after not being able to participate, now I realized that I was putting on weight. So I would work out, lose it, put on back the weight, work out, lose it, put on back the weight, work out, lose it, and it was just a cycle of fluctuation. Until I said to myself, this don't make no sense. How is it that, you know, you work out and then you just stop for a little and then all of a sudden you put on so much weight, right? The thing, you know, the thing is so troublesome because every time you put on the weight, it would be more than the last time you put on the weight, right? So it got to a point where I could not fit in my fat clothes anymore. My fat clothes was the clothes that I would put on whenever I got fat. And it got to that point where I couldn't fit in my fat clothes, and this was another wake-up call for me. So even though I had the wake-up call, I made my changes incrementally, gradually. So I started by not drinking soda. Then I started, you know, not putting sugar in my tea. Then after a while, I stopped drinking animal milk until in January 2019, I decided to go vegetarian. So I started that by not eating meat once a week, then twice a week, then 3 times, till I was only eating meat on weekends, till I was only eating meat once a week, until I was no longer eating meat. But don't judge me now. I would go on the road, especially for work, and no matter how you tell them that there's a vegetarian and a vegan on the team, them no business about that, right? So I would go to events and then they're sharing food and I realized there's nothing for me. So I'd have to take the raw veg, you know, when they have the little raw veg. So I'd have said, full up my plate of that. And then I would have said, they would have the curry chicken or the curry goat and fried chicken and all sorts of things. And I said, don't give me none of the meat, you know, but put some curry gravy on the vegetable there for me. And my co-workers would laugh, you know, and then would say, since you're eating the curry gravy, might as well you just eat the meat. And I was like, but that don't make no sense to me. I am here, and you're telling me I must go 10 steps backwards because I'm at curry gravy stage. No, man. So I never bother pay them no mind. I continued in my curry gravy stage until I no longer needed to put curry gravy on my vegetables, right? Right. So I got to that point now where I was stronger. And then I decided for my 40th birthday in 2020 that I was going to do 40 days raw. What does that mean? 40 days of uncooked plant food. So that's your fresh fruits, your leafy greens, your raw veg, your raw nuts and seeds, you know, your coconut water, your water. And I decided to do that, and I decided to invite my social media community to join me. And to my surprise, 80 persons said that they would join. And although, mind you, 50 persons actually joined out of the 80, and then not all 50 who started ended the 40 days. But what I can tell you is that every single person that started got results, from fat loss to weight loss to inches removed from their waistline, to no period cramps while on the journey, to alleviation of PCOS symptoms and a host of other benefits. Right? And I had put out a feedback form, asked them, you know, how was it and everything. And they shared their results and the benefits that they had. And they said, though, all right, we want you to really have this again because we see how beneficial it is to our body, but we can't do the 40 days, we'll do the 21 days. So that is how the 21 days raw challenge started. In May of 2021, I decided to do a 20 days raw challenge. and it went well. And person saw results, and then they saw the results, and their family and friends saw the results. So they said, no man, you need to do one in June. And then we did June, and then they said, no man, you need one in July. And we've been having 21 days raw ever since. I just ended one in August, and trust me, the results have been amazing. To date, in January 2019, I started my vegetarian journey. To date, I have lost 50 pounds. My energy increased, my mood and mental clarity improved, and it helped to relieve me of horrible monthly period cramps, kind of like Shelly had, horrible monthly period cramps. And the persons who had joined, they got benefits like fibroids shrinking, people who the doctors wrote off, they've been trying for years to get pregnant, got pregnant. And all those transformational stories just made me feel great, like I'm a part of something that's impacting lives, families, and households. And I don't know, it just made me feel good. Because I was told that diabetes runs in my family. So because all of the persons on my mother and my father's side have it. And I'll be 42 in 2 days. And I will tell you that I am, to this point, I have no signs of diabetes, no signs of high blood pressure, no signs of stroke. And I have the same or almost the same waistline that I did when I was 16. Is that it? Is that it? All right. Since that is it for me, let me leave you with 2 questions. I really want you to answer these 2 questions. Because whatever you are not changing, you are choosing. So, 1, what are you choosing? Are you choosing the big belly, the excess visceral fat, the high blood pressure, the diabetes? What are you choosing? And 2, are you using your mouth to dig your own grave? Are you consciously eating the foods that you know cause, worsen, or prolong disease? Are you using your mouth to dig your own grave? Thank you for having me. My next raw food challenge is in October, but because I'll be 42 in 2 days, I'm giving you a 42% discount. Just follow me on Instagram at Stacia Davidson. Send me a DM and I'll send you the link with a 42% discount code. Long story short, what are you choosing, and are you using your mouth to dig your own grave? Have a awesome evening.